to Bear Necessities, your official Coventry Bears podcast. We live at coventrybears.com and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dave Musson, and joining me as always is my co-pilot and former Bears fullback, Craig Cathcart. Craig, how are things?
Yes, I'm all good, mate. Obviously disappointed with the result, but we can put things right next week with another home game against Rochdale.
Yeah, definitely. And we will look ahead to that as part of this week's show, where we're also going to pick over, obviously, an incredibly disappointing weekend for the Bears last weekend, which saw the team lose 44-26 at home to the London Skolars, playing in front of fans for the first time since early 2020. As I mentioned, we will briefly look ahead to this weekend's game against Rochdale Hornets, which is, as Craig said, another instant chance to bounce back and another home game as well. And, of course, we will hear from head coach Rich Squires and player coach Dave Scott. But I guess let's start with the story of Sunday's game for those of you who weren't able to attend. And it was great to see so many of you at the butts, I should say. It was brilliant to see and hear you all. And long may that continue the rest of the season. So the Bears started perfectly, scored on the first set of the game. They went the length of the field with the first set, played it on the last tackle, and some good work down the right by Rhys Rance set up Liam Wellham for a score, which took us to 4-0 ahead. And we were almost in again not long after that. AJ Towers making his home debut. He was one dropped ball away from being almost certainly in for his second try in 2 weeks. And that proved to be a slightly pivotal moment, as the Skolars actually scored back-to-back tries not long after that, both converted. Both from fairly close out as well. And that took the scores to 12-4 in the Skolars' favour. But then the Bears themselves scored 3 tries in the space of 10 minutes. So Kieran Sherratt scoring first to bring the Bears back to 8-12. Again, the Bears playing the ball on the last tackle. Good work in the backs from Dave Scott, and Kieran powered over from close range. The conversion for that one hit the post, unfortunately, from Dan Coates. But then he made up for it by scoring a quite superb try himself a few minutes later. Jack Dawson burst through the line with a really great line. He slipped it back inside to Coates, who ran under the post to score. And then a few minutes after that, it was the same man again, scoring another great try, some more great handling this time from Matty Wellham, Dave Scott again, and Dan Coates was in under the post. And that took it to 20-12 to the Bears with about half an hour gone, and things were looking good. Even a Skolars try right on half time, which pulled it back to 2018, didn't really dampen the mood or anything. The Bears were in a very strong position at half time, as they were 2018 ahead. Second half was a different story. Despite having the win behind them and obviously being in the lead going into the game, it just went wrong for the Bears, and the Skolars ended up scoring 5 tries across the second half. They were first to score not long after the break, scored in the corner to edge in front 22-20. But then credit to the Bears, they took control again, and a few minutes after Dave Scott scored his first try in a Bears shirt, he spotted a gap, he took it, he scored. And that, with the conversion, took it to 26-22 to the Bears with about 20 minutes to play. Again, a really strong position. But this is where it really all started to go wrong for the home side. The Skolars scored again not long after to bring it back to 26-all. And then scored, 3 tries in the last 15 minutes to really pull away and put a bit of a gloss on a deserved victory for the Skolars, but perhaps a slightly larger scoreline than the back and forth of the game suggested. But yeah, they scored 3 tries in the last 15 minutes. One of them particularly disappointing, a length of the field score. Kickoff just went straight to their winger, who had some space to run into, and he sauntered past most of the Bears defenders and slipped it back inside for an easy score. And then the final try, the Bears were forcing the issue, trying to find a pass, and unfortunately a Dan Coates pass was intercepted, and it was an easy run in for the Skolars winger to wrap up that 8th try and a 44-26 win for the visitors. Obviously a really disappointing one for the Bears, not the way we wanted to welcome back home fans. Craig and I will pick over some bits of it shortly, but first let's hear what Bears head coach Rich Squires said after the game.
Well, Rich, I mean, perfect start, score after a couple of minutes, but ultimately far from the result you wanted. I mean, how do you explain that, particularly the second half?
Yeah, we've let ourselves down today. I think we've gone away from doing the things that we've done really well over the last couple of weeks, and kind of didn't get out of second gear. We were in cruise control from the start. I think went 100 metres of the first set, and then, once Skolars got the noses in front, they did really well and controlled the game, and we just didn't do everything to kind of counteract that. They played at the pace they wanted, we didn't play at the pace we wanted to go at, which is nice and quick and play around the ruck, and when we did that, we scored points off it, like in the first half, but we went away from that and tried to do things away from what we've meant to be doing, and Skolars played well to see out the game.
And I mean, what learning points can you take from this? Because they were positive. There were parts of the game when Bears were in control, and some of the tries you scored were fantastic. I mean, is it a case of just knuckling down on the positives, or are there things in that second half that you need to learn from?
I think it's not. I think the boys know what they've done. It's more of an attitude thing. It's more of a, once we're in the battle, it's getting, how do we get out of that rut to counteract it? And we didn't have anything to kind of offer today. We scored some points by doing really simple things and nothing flash. So why we go away from it, I don't know, but it's something we'll look at this week and address going into next week, but we'll need to address it fairly quickly.
And in terms of, I noticed you lost Jed Charlton fairly early on. Was that a head injury, or was that?
Yeah, I think he took a knock and he wasn't, he was sick behind the stand, which wasn't very nice. So we got the thing from the doctor to say that's him done for the day, which is a loss to start with, which obviously leaves us a man down. But I think that kind of set precedent with it. But yeah, we kind of had nothing. We lacked energy today, and it's something we'll address.
And are there any standout individual performances you particularly did that did catch your eye in this one?
Not really. I thought we were really poor across the board. The players who have really stepped up for us were very average today. And they've seen it themselves as well, and they've addressed that. So, but some people need to adjust themselves down, and some people have been cruising along and kind of get a little bit of a rocket this week. But it's one of them games. I think we were due a dip. We've kind of got the rub of the green the last couple of weeks, and we've been there in energy battle. So me and Dave will have a look at a few things which we'll do differently going into this week, and see how we can get the best out of the boys and kind of get a reaction we want.
And does this affect your squad selection for next week? Because we talked last week about how it was going to be a difficult decision for this game, and there were players who, people might have assumed have not made the cut, but actually justified their place in the team. Like, does this almost give opportunities to people who've been on the fringes now?
Yeah, definitely. Some people have played themselves out of the shirt today. We mentioned before the game, there's people biting at the bit to, chomping at the bit to get shirt. So some people will play themselves out of the shirt today, and we'll address the injuries, but there will be some changes going for next week.
And in terms of next week, Rochdale back here at the Butts, another big test. Obviously, you want to put this week behind you. What's the plan going into next week? What do you focus on?
I think it's just focus on doing what we worry about other people too much. We just need to focus on the things that we do, and when we do it really well, we look a really good team. So it's just going to be focusing on ourselves and not look at the external factors that are going to be within the game, and just try to focus ourselves. And Rochdale have beaten Keighley today, so they'll be coming flying. And it's for me today. It's the first time the fans back. It's kind of should have given us a boost, whereas the boys have let themselves down and kind of let everybody else down who've come down today. So it's not the team that the team that's played today is not the team we want the fans to see. So we'll address that this week. But yeah, we'll just have to address things going into next week. But there'll be some changes, and we'll go a different way.
Well, hard luck today. Thanks for coming and chatting to us, and see you next week.
Thank you.
So huge thanks to Rich, and we will also hear from Dave Scott later in the show. And I should also say apologies for the blustery noise in the background of that interview. It was not pleasant weather to be recording post-match interviews in, particularly as we're not allowed inside yet due to ongoing COVID restrictions. And if I sounded cold, that's because I was very cold. Anyway, Craig, Sunday, not what we wanted from the weather, not what we wanted from the result. And parts of the performance were great, but overall not good. I mean, you and I were recording this a couple of days after the game. We've had some days to digest it now. What do you think of that game looking back on Sunday now?
I think, if I'm brutally honest, it's one of the most disappointing defeats I've seen from the Bears, because we've been outclassed before. We've played against teams who've had better organisation, better players. We've gone into a lot of games in the past with maybe not the expectation that we're going to win, but we were happy with a good performance and, going up against a better team and playing well. I went into the game on Sunday, and I shouldn't have let it happen, but I went in with the expectation that we were going to win. and there was nothing in the first half that suggested that we weren't going to win. And even at 26-22, it looked like I was thought, right, that's it. We're back. We're going to take charge of the game again now and see it out. But I have to give credit to Skolars. I do think they were superb. Really impressed with their halfbacks. Their hooker was superb. Their back three were phenomenal. They really brought the game to the Bears. They made it difficult. They showed composure in the final 20 minutes to see out the game. It was really disappointing because I think a lot of the really good stuff that we'd seen in the first couple of games, particularly defensively, just seemed to go out the window. And I don't know whether it was just one of those games where the Bears didn't quite get the rub of the green, and you've got to be able to play in those conditions. If the ref gives a couple of decisions against you, you turn and face and you get on with it. But it seemed to be that when a 50-50 decision went against the Bears, Skolars scored off the back of it. But you can't allow that to happen. The other thing to say as well is in the first half, there was a spell where we scored 3 tries in the space of 7 or 8 minutes. And it looked easy. We were breaking the line without having to do an awful lot and playing some superb rugby. And particularly the one, I think it was the second Dan Coates try, was just superb. I think the guys thought we're going to score at will here, and it just didn't happen. We could have been 20 points up at halftime, but we went in 2 points in the lead. And at the time, I was thinking, is this enough? But then we had the wind with us in the second half, thought field position. But we never really got it down near there. Apart from a couple of spells, we never really challenged their line that much in the second half. As I said, fair play to them. They were just superb in the second half. But defensively, we were poor. We were tackling in twos, but they had some big lads in their pack, and they were just making too many yards every time. They did make far more yards from the hit-ups than the Bears pack did. And I think we were missing on the third man tackling. So 2 players going high, we needed a third man to come in and chop and take the man down. But they were, really digging in and making yards every time, and it was making it hard for us defensively. And also near the line, they converted opportunities when they got them. So, yeah, overall disappointing, but taking some positives. There was some really good rugby played. We've shown that there is a lot of talent in this pack or in this team, and they just need to get back to that and do that again next week against Rochdale.
Yeah, and I think that came out from Rich's post-match interview. He was, he said like when they focused and did the basics, they looked really good. And as you say, the tries we scored were excellent. And I think that was almost the most frustrating thing, was that almost when they relaxed into it and just focused on their job and got back to what we'd seen in the previous 2 matches, it looked so easy for them, and that probably did let the confidence filter through into the fans as well. But you're right, there was just particularly that second half that they just weren't on it, and I echo you. I think Skolars played the conditions, played the situation, played everything exceptionally well. It was almost a I feel like it's a sort of classic scenario against the Skolars. Certainly in the time we've been doing this podcast, I can't think of many times. We always seem to lose to them in Coventry, and we generally go and win down there. And it's always a frustrating game at home to the Skolars, because
we always let it go in the last 20 minutes. I don't know why. I really don't know why, because and it's no disrespect to Skolars. They've got some really good players, and and they've got a good coach, but it does feel, in the moments in the game, it does feel like we're better than them, but clearly not based on Sunday. They played very, very well, and if they play like that against other teams, they'll pick up some other wins.
So Rich said in his post-match interview that some players have played themselves out of a shirt from last weekend. And I don't think it'd be right for us to speculate on who that might be. I don't think that's fair. And we will see the proof will be in the team sheet this Sunday against Rochdale. I kind of wanted to flip it around and see. Obviously, it was a disappointing game and one where there weren't many standouts. But did anybody catch your eye in particular, Craig? I mean, I wanted to give a shout out for Jack Dawson. Called into action very early on. We lost Jed Charlton after pretty much the second play of the game, which did have an effect in terms of fitness because we were down a man on the interchanges. But I thought Jack Dawson, who'd played in the centres against West Wales and done a terrific job, then to come in the second row and of all of the players in the Bears pack, he was the one who was constantly breaking the line, making yards, and I thought really made a strong case for him, his inclusion in at least the 17 going forward, if not from the starting.
Yeah, signed from Derby Elks. So signed from another Midlands club. He looks a real find. Looks really good. I think when players step up into League One and they play at that level, some players, no matter how good they look in training, can find the transition difficult, the physicality and the speed and everything else of League One. But he looks right at home, and he doesn't, it looks like he could be a really good signing this year. I think he can certainly hold his head high from the performance on Sunday. In terms of other performances, I thought Dan Coates was really good at times. He's a young player. He's getting League One. He has played in League One before, but he's in the Bears team now as the first choice standoff, and he's doing well, doing really, really well. And he looked fantastic at times on the ball on Sunday, and both of his tries were excellent. So, I really thought he definitely caught the eye, and I think he's going to be some player once he's playing week in, week out and playing regularly for the Bears. Dave Scott again, I thought he was excellent again. Scored a really nice try, breaking the line. In terms of the pack, I think there was some good moments from the pack, particularly when they played stuff at a high tempo. I think Stefanos Bastas caught the eye a little bit. I think he did things simple, but I think once he's got some more minutes under his belt, I think he'll certainly be a very good signing for the Bears. Looks a really decent player. Peter Ryan again put some big hits in defensively, but I think I don't want to single out the pack because I think there was poor performances across the park at times, but the pack certainly didn't dominate as much as they had done in the previous two games. So I think there's, as they've said in the interviews, as Rich has said in the interviews, I think there's certainly some thinking to be done about getting the right combinations going into the next game against Rochdale, which will be a really tough game.
Yeah, and it's a chance for some of those players who have been in the match day squads but not made the cut to maybe stand up and make their case. And as we talked about in pre-season, it's an intense season this year. It's back to back, so a bit of rotation probably isn't a bad thing anyway. And if previous performance has sort of forced that, then so be it. We'll get to see who takes that opportunity and makes an impression. Before we hear from Dave Scott, I just wanted to quickly mention, obviously we had the fans back, and I think there were around 150 in the ground in total once you added in sort of officials as well, which is about what we would be allowed due to COVID restrictions at the moment. It was really good to have that crowd back, wasn't it? We ended up sat near some Skolars fans, which was obviously a little bit annoying with the way the match went, but it was just good to have that atmosphere back, wasn't it? And to see some people for the first time in over a year.
Yeah, I think there ended up just over 200, which I think is in the scheme of things compared to previous Bears attendances is not the best attendance, but equally, due to restrictions and the fact that it was all tickets, and there are still people who might be wary of coming to games. It was good to see some old faces, and certainly the atmosphere was really, really good. there wasn't many away fans in attendance. So I think when we have other games where they bring more away fans, certainly they'll be back to what is a really good atmosphere. So I think attendances will pick up certainly as restrictions lift and as more people are confident about coming to the games. But it was just brilliant to have the fans back. And again, I think that was possibly another thing that added a little bit of disappointment for me, because you see all these people back who haven't watched a game for over a year, and for the team to play some really excellent stuff at times, you could tell the disappointment that people had not getting that win at home. But it was still an enjoyable game to watch and a really good atmosphere, and it was really lovely to see some of the people that I hadn't seen for such a long time.
Yeah, and I have seen fans on social media have been saying, obviously disappointed with the result, but really happy to get back and already looking forward to the Rochdale game as well. So by the time this podcast goes out, I think Rochdale tickets will be available on the Bears website. So if you are thinking of coming down, do go and get yourself a ticket. You can buy them right up to match day. You just need to bring your code to get in on the gate. But it's, The Butts is open again for business. The Bears want you in the crowd cheering them on, so do come along. Right, let's go on, Craig. Go on.
One last thing I should say about how well it was organised as well, though. A lot of work has gone into making sure that it was organised and organised well. I thought the stewarding on the day was excellent. You could have a build-up of fans outside the ground, but everyone got in quickly, temperatures taken, all that sort of stuff. And everyone's seated, and it was just organised really, really well, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very smooth. It didn't take any longer than it normally does to get through the gates and get in. It was, perfectly organised. Don't let it put you off. Come on down, cheer the Bears on Sunday, and let's see if they can bounce back against Rochdale. Right, let's get some more reaction from last Sunday's game now, this time from player coach Dave Scott, who did, of course, bag his first Bears try, but obviously it wasn't enough to secure the win.
Dave, what's the mood like in the dressing room after that one?
Bitterly disappointed, to say the least. I don't think there was one smile in that changing room. It wasn't the most pleasant experience in the world, but it's something we need to learn from, and we need to learn from really quickly. I think probably going into the game, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and for me, we probably crossed that line a little bit. We put in a really strong performance against Barrow. We carried that over to West Wales, and I think there was an element of we thought we were good enough just to turn up today, and it's a very harsh lesson. It's a very bitter pill to swallow, but it just goes to show that no matter who you play in this division, you've got to be in your A game, and if you're not, you're going to get turned over and you're going to get points put on you like we saw today.
Do you think it was almost a bad thing on reflection that we scored so early in the game? Do you think that played into the sort of overconfidence you were talking about?
Not really, no. I think there was always you always want to score points, but I don't know. It's a difficult one to say. Perhaps, we did fall in love with ourselves a little bit. We scored some really good points. We came up with some really nice plays, and it was very good rugby league at times. But you can't do that fancy stuff, or you can't do that structural, technical stuff and back it up with basic errors, basic penalties, and invite teams into your half, because there's only so long before there's going to be a breach. And we saw that today, and it was just very disappointing the way that we weren't able to back up the really good stuff that we did, and we really let ourselves down in that aspect of the game.
And I suppose also some credit has to go to Skolars for the way they capitalised on our mistakes in that second half in particular.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't take anything away from them. They were the better team today. They played the percentages of the game a lot better, and we spoke at half-time that we've got the wind behind us. We just need to kick it into the corner. We need to keep them down there. We don't need to try and win the game twice. And everything that we said we were going to do, we didn't do. And that was the most frustrating bit about it, was Skolars, even though they had the win against them, they still completed the sets. They chewed up metres and yardage, and their ends to sets were pretty good, and they got on board with a kick chase, and they made it difficult for us, and they forced us into errors, they forced us into trying to overplay it, and they forced us to come up with penalties. So well done to Skolars. I think they played very well today, and they deserved the win.
I'm sure it's probably scant consolation in the grand scheme of things, but you got yourself a try in front of the fans. That must have been a nice moment for you.
Yeah, a really nice moment. It's always nice to get over the whitewash. For me, I'm not bothered about scoring tries. It's always nice to get them. But yeah, just so as long the team's scoring points and we're ahead in the scoreboard, that's all I'm really bothered about. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case today. And I think that try put us in the lead. And at that point, I think that was a key moment of the game where it was on a bit of a knife edge. It could have gone either way. And I don't think we completed off that next set, and that really killed us. And that's what I mean. We come up with some good stuff and then we back up with some not so good stuff, and we need to learn to be ruthless and strangle teams out of game. When you've got your foot in their throats, you just have to squeeze that a little bit harder and just not give them a sniff. And today we give them a sniff and they grew a third leg from that, and that's ultimately why they won the game. I don't necessarily think that they're a better team than us. I just think that today we didn't bring our A game, and they definitely capitalised on that, and we let ourselves down massively. I mean, well done to Skolars. They played the game well, a lot better than us, and they deservedly won the game.
And just lastly, before we get blown away by this vicious gale that's swirling around, I mean, what do you do now going into the Rochdale game next week? What do you take from this week? How do you reflect? How do you plan for that?
I think the first thing is to watch the video back. And we need to focus on the areas that we did well. It's never easy losing, and from being in the dressing room, the lads know they don't need to be reminded what they did wrong. We need to identify those areas of weakness, and we need to patch them up in training. So we'll identify it throughout the week. When we come to training, we'll make sure that we address it, and then we'll have a look at the Rochdale game from today. I can't remember who they played, but we'll have a good look at that, and we'll see how that we want to play this week. But I think the focus hasn't got to be on them so much, it's got to be on us, and we need to look at ourselves in the mirror, and we need to get back to our game model of complete, kick long, chase hard, and enjoy that defensive challenge. And today we just didn't have that energy, and we didn't have that ruthless streak that we've seen in previous weeks with us.
Well, thanks for coming and chatting to us, Dave. Hard luck today, and good luck for next week.
Cheers, thank you very much.
So thanks to Dave as ever, much appreciated for joining us. It's always difficult to do those interviews after a loss, and particularly when it's horrible and cold as it was on Sunday. Craig, let's put last Sunday behind us now and instead focus on this coming weekend. That chance to bounce back that we've been talking about with another home game. A tough one though, in the form of Rochdale Hornets. What are you thinking going into this one? I mean, I think it's safe to assume from both of us that we will be seeing the positive and we will be feeling confident. But how are you feeling ahead of the visit of Rochdale?
They've looked pretty good. They look like they can score points from anywhere. They had a big win against West Wales last week, though it should be said it was really a close game up to about 60 minutes, as I understand. And it was pretty even at half. I think it was something like, what was it, 8-6 or something at half time. So a very close game there up until the last 20 minutes. So I do think if the Bears can play like they did in the second half against Barrow and for pretty much the whole game against West Wales, then certainly we have a chance of beating them. I think we're playing at home. I think the guys will want to put right some of the issues, and mistakes against Skolars, and I think it's one that we can win. But the lads will need to be on it 100% because, as I said, Rochdale can score from anywhere, and they've got some excellent players in their ranks as well. So
yeah, and of course it's the latest chapter in the ongoing relationship between the Bears and Fui Fui Moi Moi, because of course long-term listeners of the podcast will remember Peter Ryan making his name for himself with that tackle on Fui Fui back at the Butts a few years ago, and then I seem to remember, was it the same year where Fui Fui ended up taking a conversion against us when one of the games we lost quite heavily up in Cumbria, which was a bit rude, I thought, but he's in a Rochdale shirt now. Peter Ryan's looking very fit and strong this year. Who knows? There could be fireworks if those two meet in the middle of the pitch. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Sunday's game as well. Rochdale, a team I've not actually watched in the flesh yet, because obviously they've been in the championship for the majority of the time we've been doing this podcast. So I'm always keen to see a new team. And a very basic thing to say, but I really like their kit. I think it's really smart. And the Bears have a good kit as well. So it's going to be a visually pleasing spectacle as well.
This is a good one. If they're a traditional team, who have a long history.
Their 150th anniversary this year, in fact.
Yeah, who have a long history. They've been near the top of the game for a long time. And, it's certainly going to be a good experience on Sunday, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Right. That feels like a good positive note on which to end it this week. So we will be back with all the Rochdale reaction next week. And don't forget, you can come to the Butts and watch that game on Sunday. All the details on the Bears website. Get your tickets. Come and help the boys get back on track in 2021. Thanks as always for listening. And we'll see you next week.